named my business Luminary Birth because of my favorite birthing quote, which is, when a woman births her baby, she leaves her body and goes to the stars to collect her baby's soul, and they return to earth together. And that really encompasses for me what birth was.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Witchy Wellness Radio. Again, I am your host, Lauren, and this is a show you learn how your body and emotions are not in the way. They are actually leading the way, and we are talking deeper into that topic today, how it relates to women's health and birthing and being empowered by your choices and knowing what choices you might have that you didn't realize you had. So we're going to be talking with Kourtney Hughes. Her business is called Luminary Birth, and we're talking all about birth, intuition, spirit babies, women's healthcare, like I said before. But before we jump in, Kourtney is a wife, mother of two, and childbirth educator living in Orange County, California. She is passionate about empowering birthing bodies and encouraging them to tap into their intuition. That's what we're about here on Witchy Wellness. So we're so excited. I can't believe you're the first birthing person on the show. So we are so excited to have you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and talk about this topic.
Yeah, I'm too. We've had a few episodes on menopause, surprisingly enough, but birthing we have not yet. So I think this is going to flow perfectly into everything that we're about here today. And I wanted to start off asking you in your own journey, how did you get into this work of helping empower and educate fellow women and birthing bodies to really be inspired and empowered about their choices?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My journey started probably, I'd say, in high school, and it was in my history class. And I can't tell you what we were learning about, but my history teacher, who was a man, he taught us what an episiotomy was. And it was for some, like, making peace between countries topic. But he basically explained how when women have babies, they cut them to make it easier for birth. And I was mortified and horrified. Went home to tell my mom, you never told me that they did this. What is this episiotomy business? I don't want that. I don't want to have babies. And she just kind of laughed. And she said, it's really not that bad. And my mom had two unmedicated births with both myself and my brother, which at the time, let's say, when did I graduate high school? That was in 2006. So during the time, it was pretty unheard of, unmedicated births. And she would always tell me the part that hurts the most is the shortest. And so having that as my foundation for what I heard about birth, because everything that we hear, we see in the media, TV shows, books, birth is always illustrated as this very painful, horrible, terrible thing. I mean, even my history teacher, teaching a class full of young kids about episiotomies, it's traumatizing. And so knowing that my mom did it, my mom could do it. And when I would ask her, why did you subject yourself to that? And she said, well, I knew it was what was best for you, and I knew I could do it, and it wasn't that bad. And so that was my foundation for my mindset going into birth. While I was scared about all that birth brought, I had that foundation. So when it came time that I became pregnant with my first baby, I knew I needed to learn more about this because my mom knew something, right? Something that was so different from the messaging that we get from society. So I took a hypnobirthing class, which I always had to preface when I would tell people in my life that I was taking hypnobirthing. I'm like, I know it sounds woo-woo, but it's not really that woo-woo. And along with that, I watched The Business of Being Born, which was produced by Ricky Lake, which is a huge, I feel like so many people, like that's their start to their journey through all of this, this birth world is watching that documentary. So with a combination of both of those things, I just became obsessed with all things birth and what it means to bring life into this world. And it's all I did, listen to birthy podcasts, read books, watch documentaries. It became my life, and anyone I talked to, I worked birth into any conversation. And so over the years, through my experience with the birth of my son in the hospital, and then 2 years later, the birth of my daughter at home, the culmination of both of those experiences just really left me called to help other families learn what their choices were, because I grew up going to the doctor told me what to do, and I did what they said, and I didn't question it. And it wasn't until the veil was lifted and I was kind of shown my power, my internal power, that I really felt like I needed to share that with other people. And I named my business Luminary Birth because of my favorite birthing quote, which is, when a woman births her baby, she leaves her body and goes to the stars to collect her baby's soul, and they return to earth together. And that really encompasses for me what birth was. And there's actually studies that have proven that women go into an altered state of consciousness during birth. And so I just want women to feel empowered, even if their birth doesn't go the way that they planned it to go. They at least made informed decisions and can feel more in control and more empowered and less likely to experience trauma after their birth. So that long-winded explanation is how I came to where I am.
That's so beautiful. And surprisingly enough, not long-winded at all. We've had many guests here. I would say perfectly winded. And yeah, the part about naming your business Luminary Birth, the altered states of consciousness, it's like, I'm assuming it's like a trance state, because you have to kind of get out of your own way. And for what I know, I watched The Business of Being Born years ago, but it's like what I've heard from friends and other podcasts I've heard and stuff is the more that you do the inner work and the less that you are scared of this, the less pain. It's that cultural, societal perception of the process is painful and scary. But once we really accept like who we are and the whole process itself, it seems that it can be even orgasmic, if you
Yeah.
will.
I haven't experienced the orgasmic birth myself, but I have heard of people who have. But I will definitely say, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's that fear, right? You go into the process being afraid, and it's that fear, tension, pain cycle. You leave your environment. I mean, let's look at animals, right? How do animals birth? They go find somewhere quiet and safe to birth their babies. And if, they hear a dog barking, they're going to stop labor. They're going to go find somewhere safe to birth their baby. Their body is going to shut down that process. It's the same for us. We leave our homes, we go into hospitals, we're signing forms, we're getting asked all these questions, we're getting cervical exams by strangers. We're not people anymore. Our space isn't honored. Your body shuts down. You're being asked, like, heaven forbid, your timeline isn't in accordance to what hospital policy is, and they start pushing, Pitocin on you or any other intervention. That's not the time for you to be making those decisions. It's going to insert fear into the space, which will lead to tension and will lead to more pain. So 95% of it is a mental game. That's my number one piece of advice for families, is to get your mind right first. I like to go a lot of releasing fear, writing down, what are your top 3 fears regarding this pregnancy, this birth. I want you to write it down, both you and your partner, because your birth team is really important and will determine the success of your birth and how it goes. So releasing that fear, doing that inner work, working on relaxing. Relaxing is the next best thing that you can do, is just relax, meditate. That's what the whole hypnobirthing part is. I like to explain it to people. If you've ever been driving and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I'm home. How did I get here? 10 minutes went by and it felt like 30 seconds. You're in a state of hypnosis. So that's all, self-hypnosis is just practicing that deep relaxation. And the more you practice it, the easier your mind can get there. So allowing yourself to just fully relax and open Because if you think about what has to happen physically, your body has to open. So if you're tense, your body can't open. So just practicing relaxing and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just letting yourself go and submitting to the process, going down to that basal instinct version of yourself where, you're not Kourtney in 2023, you're Kourtney in the 1900s, you're the beginning of humanity, right? And you're just letting yourself go and allowing your body to open to the process and just focus on your breathing. And it's all, you can go through, I tell everyone, you can go through anything in 60 seconds, right? If a contraction is 60 seconds long, you just breathe through, ride that wave, breathe through that contraction, and each wave will bring you closer to your baby. So yeah, it is a mind game for sure. And just letting your body take over and do all the work.
Yeah, I'm assuming, like you just said, I was about to ask too. It's like we've been birthing for millennia. We wouldn't be here if this wasn't something natural and safe. And it's really getting back to those primal,
Yes.
I don't know the urges, but energies that, like that hypnosis state, like you said, a lot of cultures get into hypnosis states for whatever, medicine ceremonies, whether connecting with the divine. And I'm assuming that birthing is something very similar from that primal sense of getting into that altered state, like you said, letting go, letting your body lead the way
Yeah.
because it knows what to do. And I
Right.
think for people, I mean, the women I work with, myself included, that's why I got into this, the perfectionist wanting to control
Yeah.
everything, right? Because that's bred from fear. That's really, really scary. The words letting go can be a trigger for some people. So I'm assuming really focusing on that, maybe even before deciding to, to have children, before getting pregnant even, is probably something that would be very helpful through the whole process to kind of continue even post birth as well.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And I am a type A personality, plan everything, control everything. And so that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
Letting go and allowing whatever was going to happen to happen. It's not easy. And trusting your intuition, in the hospital. It's changing now, but it was very much birth on your back, feet in the stirrups, which is very counterintuitive to the physiology of birth, right? If you think about it, in an upright forward leaning position, like squatting, your gravity's on your side at that point, which is a huge help. But just following your instincts, even if you're in your birth class and you think, this is how I want to birth, that might not feel good to you in the moment. There's a lot of positional stuff you can look at around birth and things you can do to create space for baby to make that journey through the vaginal canal and the pelvis, but just following your intuition. And that can be hard, the letting go and just saying, you know what, actually laying on my side is what feels right. And just taking that position. It's really helpful. And when you are, a control freak, like a lot of us, that can be really hard because you don't know what to trust, if you should trust your intuition and you're using your thinking brain. Like, well, this is what I learned in class. This is what I should do. I myself have learned through my births that I have panic attacks, like during the crowning phase. And I have discovered it is because of that need to let go of control. And that's hard for me. And it's something I learned about myself after my first birth when I was in the hospital. And I thought it was because of the situation I was in. And I had the on-call doctor, not my OB. So it was someone I didn't trust, and I chalked it up to that. But when I was having my second baby at home, and this was the crowning phase, so this is pretty much the height of the intensity. And I don't like to say pain, I like to say intense. So it wasn't painful, it was intense, an intense sensation. And I couldn't breathe, and I was like hyperventilating. And it's funny because I talked myself through the panic attack. I was like, you're okay, you're safe, your baby's almost here, just breathe, just breathe. And everyone in the room was just like amazed that I was talking myself through a panic attack. But with that, I realized that need to let go of the control, that height of intensity creates panic attacks in me. So, even it's good to prepare before birth, but sometimes you don't get it quite right until you go through it. So it's good to like kind of debrief afterwards and really reflect on what you were going through and what you were feeling.
Yeah, not to judge ourselves either
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
panic attack or the negative thoughts or deciding to do something differently than we thought we were going to. And I think it applies to any area of life is that you learn to trust ourselves. But if the quote unquote intense or bad
Mhm.
situations might appear, to just learn to take that responsibility and not blame ourselves for not being perfect. That's
Right,
but
right.
what's been coming in my life, not in the birthing world, but just that in general. And
Yeah,
it's so
yeah,
it
even
all
with
ties.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So talking about, being really empowered by our own intuition, letting go. I know that's one of your big proponents is educating people on their own choices instead of, I think Dr. Christian Northrup had this quote, women's health doctor. The doctors might have this body of wisdom, but you have wisdom of your own body. So
Mhm.
it's about balancing, having these people of expertise, but also listening and what's right for you. So I'd love to hear, how do you approach empowering these women and men and these couples to be able to balance those, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a few kind of tips that I give my students when we're learning is, we can't cover every single thing in class, but if they take home at least this when they're proposed, if the doctor says they want to try XYZ intervention, ask what the benefits and the risks are first, right? Um, what's the pros and cons? That way they can understand, what's the purpose of this technique or procedure. What's the risk? Because a lot of times they won't tell you the risk. I mean, even when you go in for an ultrasound, just routine checkup, ultrasounds do actually pose a risk to the baby, but they never tell you that. Are there any alternatives? Is there something else we can do? Can we wait 30 minutes? Or is there something else we can try first? And then getting space. What is my intuition telling me? How do I feel about this decision? And just having time to think about it. Because if you're forced to make these decisions quickly, you can't really get in touch with what your intuition is telling you. So it's what are the benefits and risk? Are there alternatives? And what is my intuition telling me about this situation? Because your intuition and even your mother's intuition, if you want to call it that, is very powerful. You know, like one of my friends was texting me that she was pregnant and we're both nursing an older child and had a pregnancy. And she was like, yeah, the doctor told me not to breastfeed my baby while I'm pregnant, which is something that doctors used to say to expecting women. And I told her, well, how do you feel about that? That's kind of my first question I ask friends when they come to me with birthy things. I say, well, how do you feel about it? She was like, well, not good. I wanted to keep, her baby just turned 1. She's like, I want to keep breastfeeding because there's a lot of benefits to extended breastfeeding. And I was like, well, if you're open to it, I can share some evidence-based information that's current. Because if there's one thing about healthcare or research in general, is it keeps changing, it keeps updating what's current best practices. And your doctor or your OB isn't always up to date on the most current evidence-based information. So she was open to it and I shared some articles with her and she appreciated it. So that's kind of my first question is what is your intuition telling you? And then what does the evidence say? And then you come up with the answer that feels right to you. And if that's, you know, going with what your doctor said and stopping your breastfeeding journey now, that's what you're comfortable with, make that decision.
And I'm thinking, as a recovering control perfectionist, having a birth plan like that seems to be more popular these days. And,
Yeah.
having this plan and balancing those changes in the moment. Because I know about myself, hearing all this and not have had any children, thinking if I'm in the peak of all of this and and I'm on kind of that dealing with letting go and something from the plan changes, knowing
Right.
myself, I need to be able to work myself through that scenario and allow that to change because sometimes that, and my partner, he will tell you that is one of my biggest triggers when things change that are not supposed, the plan changes.
Right.
Oh no, heaven
Yeah.
forbid.
Yeah.
So what are some, I guess, how continuing our conversation, really, what mindset, but also practical things that maybe we could do in the moment or just preparing ourselves to say, this is the plan, but it's not how detail how it's
Right.
going to go.
Yeah. So honestly, the birth plan is going to be your list of preferences, right? So it's what communicates to your health team when this happens, this is what I want. And it's really a tool to get you to think about all of these things ahead of time and not necessarily like a set plan, like this is set in stone, this is happening. And I know with just the terminology birth plan, it leads a lot of people to think this is the plan, this is how it's going to go. But just telling all my students ahead of time, it's not going to go how you plan it. Each birth is unique in its own design and happens the way it's meant to unfold. And you just have to go with the flow, which is not easy. But this is a tool to help you know what your preferences are ahead of time so that when it doesn't go according to plan, you already know the evidence on whatever that is, whether it be getting Pitocin or an epidural. You already know the benefits and the risks in your head before you have to make that decision. And planning all of that out ahead of time is going to make you feel more empowered to make decisions.
And I'm assuming that visualization part too is really helpful because it might not go
Mhm.
exactly how you're visualizing it, but from my point of view, visualizing is more about that feeling. And
Right.
how do you want to feel in this scenario, regardless of what's going on? So how can we utilize that tool throughout this whole process?
Yeah. So with visualization, I go through this whole kind of routine and practice in our classes, and I have them first draw a picture of how they visualize their birth. So first they draw it, which is kind of awkward at first, and I ask them just think about it, like, what do you want to see? What do you want to hear? What do you want to smell? Think about all of those things and how you want to feel. And then while they're practicing their relaxation, I recommend some tracks that kind of talk them through kind of like a labor rehearsal. So it kind of talks them through the surges, the contractions, and all of that, and just kind of help them get in that mental space, but just envisioning their birth, where they're at. Are they in a bed? Do they have a birthing tub? Are they on a birthing ball? And just practicing that feeling and seeing all of it come together, like who is there with you, what feelings do you feel. Visualization is a huge tool even in sports, just visualizing the ideal outcome that you want, helping it come, helping it come to you.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool. Our minds don't actually know the difference
Mhm.
between the real life and visualizing and feeling that in our head. There's been researches done with playing the piano, learning to play the piano, whether you're physically doing it or rehearsing it in your head, learning how to shoot a basketball. They
Yeah.
actually measure your brain during those studies, and it reacts actually more so when you're visualizing the same amount of neurons because our neurons in our mind, the more we wire or practice it, the
Yeah.
neurons in the memory are going to wire together. So that's how positive thinking or law of attraction really works. What we focus on grows, and
Right.
that's visualization. Really, that's a tongue twister. Really, really
Yeah.
helps with that.
Yeah, and that's why I say practice relaxing, practice that, hypnosis, because it'll be faster for your brain to get there. Because like you said, it's wiring all those neurons and the pathways to either that positive thinking or, you know, the success in shooting the basketball.
Exactly, exactly. This is a little change in topic, but I know part of the growth, we think of birthing a child, sometimes we end up birthing something and a growth in ourselves. And I wanted to really touch on this topic that's near and dear to a lot of women who I feel like more so have been coming out and are able to speak about miscarriages and spirit babies nowadays than we used to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would love to hear your perspective on this and
Yeah.
how we can all learn and love more through all of this.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for asking that question. And I'll first start off with saying, um, something that sparked this in my mind when you first started asking the question is when we birth our babies, there is kind of, it's not just the birth of the baby, but it's the birth of the mother, right? So it's death to the maiden, birth of the mother. And it's very spiritual and it is a change. It's a huge change. I mean, research shows you physically change, your brain changes. Um, Everything about you is going to change and it's never going to go back to the way it was before. So a lot of it is painful, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally as well, because you are learning who this new person is, yourself and this new human that you just brought into the world. Um, and with that, looking at birth more spiritually, um, I have always told everyone I'm having 2 kids, right? I'm having 2 kids. I'm having a boy first and then a girl. Ever since I can remember, when I was a kid, this was the plan. And when I met my husband and we talked, he's the kind of guy that's like, I'll have as many babies as I can support. If that's 12, we'll have 12 babies. He comes from a big family. I was an only child until I was 13 and my brother was born. So I've always wanted to have more siblings, but never really did. But 2 seemed like the perfect number. And we had our second, and I was like, okay, our family's complete. But my intuition kept pulling on me that even though 2 makes sense on paper, 2 is practical, there's 2 of us, we have 2 of them. Money wise, I mean, childcare is so astronomically expensive. Our car cannot fit 3 car seats in it. But my intuition kept telling me, your family's not complete. You have a third baby. And so I read this book called Spirit Babies by Walter McKitchen. And he talked a lot about how, he starts off talking about how he recognized that he could see spirit babies and the whole realm of spirit babies and your karma and what karma brings to you. And, like reincarnation and these spirits that are drawn to you because of maybe experiences you've had in past lives. So it's not necessarily these are the children or this was the family unit that I had in another life, but maybe maybe they were abandoned in another life and they're looking for a family that will just love them for no matter who they are and won't abandon them or whatever it may be. Your karma brings you together. And so I read that book and I was like, yeah, I have a spirit baby. And I actually did a psychic reading because I heard him talk on another podcast a couple of times. And my grandmother had just passed away, and I was just feeling very raw and just kind of aimless in my spiritual life. And I was like, you know what, I need to sign up for a reading. And he confirmed for me that I didn't even ask the question, but that I have a spirit baby and that they you'll conceive in September. And so I was like, wow, that's crazy, but that feels right to me. And so I told a select few about this because I get mocked in my family because I am such a spiritual person. But anyway, so I told my husband and he just kind of laughed. And the book goes through kind of this meditation chant that you can do, kind of like a ritual to get in touch with your spirit baby and communicate with your spirit baby. And just that sometimes they need a little reassurance too, that they're wanted. And it's a contract, right? So it's between you and the baby. And sometimes conception can occur, but then maybe this body isn't the right body for the spirit baby. Maybe there's something, they have conditions for their next life that they need fulfilled for their karma. And this body just isn't the right body. And so they leave, but the spirit doesn't die. Energy can't die. It's still there. So your spirit baby is still there. It's just waiting for the right time or the right body, whatever it may be. And recently I did experience a miscarriage last week actually, and I have a 4-year-old, and he was very excited about this pregnancy and having a baby and asking all these questions. Can I carry the baby? Can I feed the baby? Can I teach the baby good things? I also have a 2-year-old, and she did not care at all about it, but my 4-year-old was very sweet, and I did tell him, which was a parenting choice that I made, but I did tell him about the pregnancy, and I did tell him about the loss of the pregnancy, and he was very sad. But I told him that, you know, while the body may have died or stopped developing, the spirit is still alive and is still here, and you might get to meet that baby someday. And he was like, oh, okay, great. And I asked him, how are you feeling? And he said, I feel good. And that kind of threw me off. And I was like, okay, well, are you feeling sad? No, I'm not sad. And I said, how are you feeling? He said, I'm happy. I'm like, oh, okay. Because yeah, I'm happy because I'm gonna get to meet the baby, but just not right now. I'll have to wait a little longer. And it was just so touching to me and so healing for me as well. As you know, I've lost this life that I held within me, even for a short time, but still all the expectation and the figuring out in my brain, okay, how is this going to work practically, to that, you know, excited anticipation for having this life join our family. And while it wasn't in September, I was like, May, that's fine. I really believe that it was meant to happen this way, to kind of light a fire under us to prepare our lives, but also to kind of prepare our hearts. And I feel like I haven't lost that spirit. Like I still feel that spirit with me. So that's been a huge source of comfort. And if anyone's interested, I highly recommend checking out that book, because it's really interesting, a really interesting topic to learn about.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your heart. I know we talked off air and I said if that, if anything comes too close to home, but your heart is so open about all of this, and your connection, like you said, and from my perspective, not knowing anything about you and your spiritual life, that this experience definitely has strengthened that bond and your own connection with yourself and
Yeah,
the higher self. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, because I know for me, but so many women listening to this, it's going to really, really help them through whatever their journey has been too.
yeah, definitely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I also, of course, appreciate anything woo related. You are very welcome here. I laugh when you said I had to select few of my family, but
Yeah.
understand. And that's about witching wellness here, is about owning that side of us. It's just a witch
Yes.
to me means a woman who's in her power. And
Yes,
and that's exactly what
absolutely.
you teach. And I do feel so called to that, the spirit baby concept, if you will, as well. And a big parenting Dr. Shafali, I don't know if you've heard of her before, but she teaches people, your kid doesn't want to be parented how you wanted to be parented. What they want, what they need as a soul. And they're not your kids, right? You're bringing this soul into this world to help grow, but they're of you, but they're not you in a way. And I think
Yeah.
the spirit baby idea or concept is kind of help strengthening that. It's the more spiritual side, rather the egoic side of childbirth and parenting and all of this as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I tell I tell my mom, I'm like, you realize you don't have control over people, right? Whether they're 1 or like 99. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And much to their dismay, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other topic of breaking, generational trauma and cycles, and choosing to go down a different path, and giving my kids that space to be that person that they are, and the room to, you know, Like, for example, letting my daughter climb up this high play structure, but being there to catch her, if she falls, but she's figuring out what her own limits are. And that can apply to anything in life. It's just what you said. I mean, they're their own person, and honoring that and just giving them a safe space to grow into, a beautiful human, and hope that they make some big impacts in the world, big or small, but that's what it's all about. But again, we go to that letting go of the control thing.
Bringing it back, bringing it back. I've heard before, and I know we talked about birth, pregnancy, but I guess post-birth kind
Oh
of
yeah.
parenting aspect. What that just brought up in my mind is I know some people kind of ask their child, even as an infant, I'm going to pick you up, or can I pick you up? Like asking that permission thing. I don't know what you have any thoughts on anything like that, but
Oh yeah,
communicating with your baby even.
absolutely. Yeah, your babies communicate with you, and a lot of studies are showing that babies, even in the womb, understand a lot more than what we thought that they could or did. And don't be afraid to start that in the womb. Start that connection, that communication. Um, Telling your baby what's happening. I'm going to go change your diaper now, or asking them permission to do those things can be really helpful in just easing the process. And it's good for their, brain development, and just honoring them as a whole other person. Like, I found that whenever I would just go change my baby's diaper, she would fight me on it. And then I started telling her, this is what we're going to do. Do you want me to do it now or in 5 minutes? And then she would respond verbally or non-verbally. And if we did that, if I either did it now or waited the 5 minutes, it went so much better. She stopped fighting me. I mean, granted, it didn't happen every single time, but I mean, I'll take a win when I could get it. But also, when you started asking that question, it reminded me of something else. We had talked about birth plans. Another plan that is incredibly important is your postpartum plan, is having a plan for after baby comes, because like I touched on before, it's such an extreme transition. And in today's society, we glorify bouncing back, right? You see it all the time on social media. A woman just gave birth 4 days ago and she's on her Peloton, right? Or she's doing a HIIT class, whatever it is. And I cringe, because you have an internal wound the size of a dinner plate that your body is healing. But because it's not seen, it's not honored. We don't expect you to lay in bed, for 15 days while it heals, but that's exactly what you should do. So having a postpartum plan of who's going to care for you, who's going to care for the mother, lay in bed, eat nourishing foods. I mean, there's a lot of cultures, Asian cultures specifically, have really beautiful, that 30-day window of time where you're just weighted on hand and foot, because you're healing, you're bonding with your baby. It's so important. And having experienced postpartum depression myself, there's a lot that you can avoid if you plan for that ahead of time. Just who's going to care for the mother, and putting realistic expectations on yourself. You don't need to be going and doing laundry. You don't need to be going to the grocery store. I know you miss Target, but you don't need to go. Like, stay in bed, please. So having that postpartum plan is really important too. Who's allowed to come over? When are they allowed to come over? What do you want them to do for you? Because people generally want to be helpful. So give them, it's not come over and hold the baby, right? It's come over and do my laundry, stock my fridge, have a list, whatever it is you want them to do, drop off their meal. People will respond typically pretty well if you give them specific things they can help you with. But it's really important, and I encourage all my families, and it's more so important to go over all of this with the partner, the support person, because we just birthed the baby. We have all these expectations of ourselves, right? Like, this is the kind of mother I want to be. These are all the things I want to do. I mean, I remember with my first, I was up trying to do things around the house because I needed to be that super mom. But with my second, I stayed in bed for 5 days, didn't do anything. I stayed around the bed for another 5 days and around the house for the last 5 days. So I didn't leave my house for, at least 15 days with my second, and I healed much quicker.
Amazing. And as soon as you said Asian cultures, I was going to say, you started talking about postpartum plan. One of my friends growing up, she's Korean, and as soon as
Oh,
she had a baby, her mom was over there with this huge pot of seaweed soup
yeah,
because the had the healing properties of this soup, and that's like
yeah,
all she ate too. But it really helps. I mean, coming from a health coaching background, like seaweed and kelp
yeah,
and all these like plants that are really high in chlorophyll are the closest thing. Chlorophyll is the closest thing to red blood cells in our body. It's really helps with
yes, exactly.
purification and
Yeah. Mhm.
healing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
they have
who's
this whole like process of
yeah.
this, we're like cleansing the blood and then we're replenishing the blood supply, right? And then
Uh-huh.
we're building nutrients. Like it's this whole process of using foods,
Yeah.
right? To heal. And
Oh,
I wish that we had more of that here.
I know. I know. Now I'm thinking future birth plans and postpartum plans where I'm like, we're gonna get this started here.
Yes. Someone
Looking up
bring me seaweed soup.
recipes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Kourtney, for coming on today. Was there anything else on your mind or on your heart that you wanted to share before we start to close the show down?
Oh, I don't know if you want to ask me that question.
Uh-oh.
No, honestly, I think we hit all of the things that were the most important
Yeah.
to me to discuss today. But I could really go on and on about birth. So
Hey, well, we can always have you back another time. We would love to have you.
oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And thank you for being with us today, opening your heart in so many ways, because I know that vulnerability is just helps so much. That energy and that love ripples out and inspires us all. So thank you. And we close the show out the same way every week. How may we, as the listeners, as a huge act of gratitude for you, be of service for you in return today?
Well, that would be if you know anybody who is postpartum in your life, and it doesn't have to be immediate postpartum, but maybe they have a 1-year-old, do something kind for them, you know, send them a Starbucks gift card or bring them some food to eat or just ask them how they're feeling, how they're doing. Because if you actually ask someone with small kids how they're doing, it's probably not great. Um, but just connect with them on a deep level and offer some kind of support. If it's babysitting while they go get a mani-pedi or they go eat a meal alone, and just provide them with support and just let them know they have someone who cares about them.
That's so beautiful. And it's paying it forward too, because what you put out into the universe is that support you're gonna get back to. So thank you for that beautiful, beautiful wisdom and action step for everybody to have today. And thank you for coming on. It was such an honor to dive deep into empowerment in the woo with you today. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you so much.